Hello and welcome. My name is Julian. In this video, I want to touch on the debate about DSLRs versus mirrorless. Now, I don't want to compare the two, but I do want to take a look at what's happening in the used market for DSLR lenses, especially for one of the best DSLR lens systems that ever existed, the EF mount L series lenses from Canon. There's something happening in the market right now for these lenses. If you want to be able to take professional photographs, perhaps you are starting out as a professional photographer, or as a very keen amateur looking to upgrade from a kit lens or a smaller system like Nikon, for example, and you're unwilling or unable to spend the amount of money on current mirrorless equipment, I think you should be taking a look at the Canon DSLR range, particularly the lenses. Now, why would you do that? With so many terrific cameras on offer at the moment from Canon, from Sony, from Fuji, Nikon too, why would you want to go back to legacy equipment? Well, very simply, because the Canon EF L lenses are incredible performers. People are getting rid of them. They've been the premium choice for wedding, portrait, landscape photographers, you name it, for a generation. And people seem to be selling them right now for crazy low money. They're dumping them, basically. They're dumping their cherished gear and they're moving over to the RF mount and the newer Canon mirrorless bodies. Or maybe they're making the switch to Sony, which I think has almost been a trademarked phrase now, certainly here on YouTube, or to Fuji, or to Nikon. Now, in Canon mythology, L in L series lenses stands for luxury and is Canon's marketing term for their high-end professional lenses. More often than not, this means that they're made more of metal and plastic, they have better glass in them, so therefore better optics, they have better or faster or quieter focusing motors, and generally better weather resistance, and I think the coatings are different on the glass as well. They're generally very tough lenses. I had a 24-70 2.8 L series lens that dropped to the ground while I was running with it. Don't ask. But anyway, it bounced on the sidewalk a few times before coming to a rest. There were scratches all over the body of it, but it still works perfectly today. Didn't need to do any repair work on it. We're going to look at eBay now and look at some examples of what sort of prices Canon EF lenses, L series lenses are selling for today on eBay. So I'm going to start here with the 16-35 f2.8 lens. So I'm looking here at sales prices, not bidding, but these are sold items, okay? And I have limited the price range just to scope down a bit the results. So if I look here, this is a 16-35 2.8 L series lens that's sold in November for just under $500. There's one here that's sold for $405. Only had 4 bids on it in a few days ago, actually, in May of 23. That's parts, don't worry about that. This one here, 450. This one, 510, 530, 509. This one here, this caught my eye because this is really cheap, $375. But also what catches my eye is this. Robert's Camera is an authorized reseller of Canon equipment. I don't really know what that means, but nevertheless, I have used Robert's Camera a few times before, and I have found them to be reliable, helpful. I would buy from them again, definitely. So if I was in the market for this lens, I don't have this lens actually, but if I was in the market for this lens, I would certainly look at anything that Robert's Camera has and see if that would be a good purchase for me. Let's do the same now for 24-70, probably the most popular 24-70. Again, Robert's Camera, here we go. Well, Robert's Camera does sell a lot of stuff actually. So 540 for that one. Here's one for 500, but again, that's from Japan. 540, that's Robert's Camera again. 540, 499. In that region of sort of, let's say 470 up to 500, maybe $540, you can get yourself an L series 24-70 constant aperture 2.8 L series lens. Let's look now at the look at the 70-200. Forget that one, that's an f4. I'm looking really here for the 2.8. There's a number of different versions of this lens. The first version was not stabilized, so it doesn't have IS, image stabilized function on it. That's spares or repairs, so forget that one. Here's one. This is from Japan. This one here is 576. This is the IS version. I don't have that one. I have the non-stabilized version, which I still think I paid $1,200 for a few years ago. So again, anywhere between sort of $500 and maybe $650, you're seeing quite a few lenses available. Let's look at a couple of primes now. 35mm. An excellent f1.4 prime L series lens, 500, 630, 670, 611. But again, around that 550 mark, maybe 500, there's a few for 700, there's a few, you can certainly pay a lot more, but I'm looking really for the ones that look reasonable at a reasonable price. Here's Robert's camera again. Here we go, 681. Let's look at the 85mm. Now the 85mm is also sometimes affectionately known as a cannonball just because it is so big and so heavy. Because it's a 1.2 lens, it does mean the focusing is quite slow. But as a portrait lens, it is just outstanding. It's also good, I understand, for astrophotography. So these are a bit more expensive, but I'm generally seeing them in that range of, I'm going to say like $550 up to $660, something like that. Here's one that's more, but that's from Japan. Here's one, oh, here's Robert's camera. Here we go, $469. So Robert's camera, they're generally not high-end pricing. They're generally in the mix. So this one went for $469. When was that? That was about a month or so ago, and that is the version 2. This is the version of the lens that I have. So, okay, there you go. If we're looking at bodies, all right, there's only one body that I would look at for the purpose of doing this, and that's the 5D Mark IV. I don't have a 5D Mark IV. I have a 5D Mark II and a 5D Mark III. I would have got the Mark IV with that beautiful 30.4 megapixel sensor, but I was already being seduced by Sony at that point, so I didn't buy that body. But I have to say, if I continue using my EF lens system like I've started using again in the last few months, I would definitely consider a 5D Mark IV body, mainly because the live view is so much better, and I am used to using the viewfinder on my Sony equipment now to check the exposure, which you can't do on a DSLR. But with good live view, you can kind of recreate it to some extent. Anyway, 876, 875, 620, 690, 500. What do we got here? 700, 881. So I'm going to say this is around the $700 to $800. Here's one for 700, 890, 690, 568. That's quite low. Oh, here's Robert's camera again. Here we go. This is a 5D Mark IV, and this one's 754. So, you know, if I was in the market for this, I would be buying that one. I'd have to read the description, of course, but really, providing the description is good condition, everything working, shutter count relatively low. Although there is a theory about shutter counts, don't get them too low, but that's for another video. $754 gets you a 5D Mark IV. Okay, so we take those lenses and that body, which has got a 30.4 megapixel sensor, I think it is, the holy trinity of zoom lenses, and then 2 incredible prime lenses. You're looking at about $3,800 total cost based on what we just looked at. That's less than just the body alone of a Sony a7R5. But what are you missing out on when you go to an older system like this? Well, firstly, it is an older system, there's no question, so let's just get that out there straight away. They don't really have the same autofocus capabilities of the current mirrorless cameras. You do lose the ability to see in real time through the viewfinder the exposure. Now that for me was the main benefit of a mirrorless body. You just don't get that with DSLRs. DSLRs are typically larger and heavier too. They have more moving parts and the bulk is needed to accommodate them. Now the sensors are older tech, but hang on a minute. Less than 5 years old. There's some amazing sensors on some of these bodies. You're not going to find any serious photographer that's going to speak poorly of the 30.4 megapixel sensor on this 5D Mark IV that we've touched on a couple of times. The image quality you get is going to far exceed your own needs, even if the current marketing of the major cam manufacturers tells you otherwise. Now, if you hired a professional photographer today, you're going to find a true mix of equipment. Some of them are going to be using mirrorless, but many will be continuing to use their existing cameras that would be DSLRs. This is for a number of reasons. Firstly, a pro photographer uses the camera as an essential tool that they use to create saleable images. They'll be very familiar with their gear and how it works in pretty much all situations. They'll know how each lens works in all situations. If they move to a new system, that means they're going to lose all that knowledge, which then has to be recovered or relearned for their new system, and they will not be able to charge higher rates to their clients as a result of that. You're not going to earn more money just because you're using mirrorless. And thirdly, in terms of perception, people hiring a photographer today, such as a wedding photographer, might feel more comfortable when their photographer turns out with a large DSLR body and some lenses. A photographer that turns out to take your wedding with a brand new Sony a7 Mark IV that looks like it came straight out of the store, they might not get that same level of confidence. Now let me give you an example of why the camera isn't necessarily going to make a difference to the picture quality. My family had a portrait shoot a few months ago. Now I didn't take the pictures, mainly because I was in them, and also someone else was paying for it. The photographer was very knowledgeable, very capable, and she did a fantastic job. She was using Canon L series lenses, but the body she was using them on was a Canon 50D, a 50D. Now the 50D is a body that was a crop sensor body with a 15 megapixel sensor, and that camera came out in 2008. She took amazing photographs with it. And why was that? Well, firstly, she's got great lenses, but more importantly, she's a professional, she's familiar with her equipment, and she knows how to get saleable images out of the gear that she's using. My point here really is that the marketing machines of all the major manufacturers are going to tell you you need a mirrorless camera and you need the lenses that go with that new mirrorless camera because of all these super cool features that they have on them. And here on YouTube, you're going to see a lot of that sort of stuff too. I'm telling you as a photographer, and I'm not a professional, I am just a keen amateur, but as a photographer, I'm going to tell you you're just as likely to get terrific images from cameras and especially lenses that are currently just at through the floor prices on eBay. They're priced low because people are selling them to buy the latest gear. The fact that this new equipment is not going to make them a better photographer just quietly seems to get lost. Look, I'm a sucker for marketing, okay? I was a Canon shooter for years before I made the move to Sony. As I say, I'm not a professional. I have done some weddings and I have sold some images. I love photography, but it's a hobby, it's not a profession. When I made the switch to Sony, I kept my Canon L series lenses and I kept my 5D Mark III body, and I actually kept my 5D Mark II body as well. I still enjoy using it, and the 5D Mark III still actually feels better in my hands than the Sony a7R IV that it replaced it. I use that Canon kit when I'm shooting tethered because that's very difficult to do with Adobe apps and Sony. Another video. Don't worry about it for today. And also for astrophotography because the filters that I've got in the setup are kind of all dialed into Canon already, so I tend to use it for that. Now, these aren't strong reasons to buy a Canon DSLR or Canon L series lenses, but I know that the prices at the moment, if I was to try and sell that gear, I wouldn't recover anything like the value that I put into them. If I take that 85mm L series 1.2, f1.2 lens that we talked about earlier on eBay, you saw that that was like $600. I bought that lens about 10 years ago. I paid $2,000 for it. The pictures it takes today are as outstanding with beautiful bokeh and just amazing images, just like it did 10 years ago. I'm not selling it for $600. Why on earth would I do that? But if I was in the market to buy one, I would definitely look at it. In summary, the L series lenses are going to give you just as much enjoyment and just as good, if not better, image quality than some of the mirrorless lenses available today, and for a fraction of the price. If you really want to invest in mirrorless, then there's always the option to buy a Canon mirrorless body, R5, R6. I wouldn't buy the original R, but that's again for another video. But get them with the Canon RF EF lens adapter. It's Canon's own, it's not third party, which means it's fully integrated with the technology in both systems. But if it was me today, and I was looking at doing this, I would probably just get the 5D Mark IV body and the lenses that we talked about in this video. Anyhow, super quick, super short. Hope this is useful. Please like and subscribe if so. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.